You're listening to Dr. Emma and me on the Tudors Dynasty and Beyond podcast. And now, here are your hosts.
Hello and welcome back to the show. Welcome back to actually Dr. Emma and me. I'm
good thing I showed up.
I was worried. Anyway, I'm Rebecca
I was
Larson.
2 minutes late, guys, and she called me on the phone. And we're going to tell the truth in this podcast.
This is a great start. We haven't even introduced ourselves yet.
Yes, so I panicked and I clicked on the wrong link, and then that took us down a rabbit hole that we just solved 2 seconds ago.
I am all about punctuality. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
You were 2 minutes late. I don't like it.
I think that's the best time a Spaniard can really do.
Well, if you're new to Dr. Emma and me or the Tudors Dynasty and Beyond podcast, I'm Rebecca Larson, and I am joined by my co-hosts.
Hi, I'm Dr. Emma.
This is not a good start to this episode.
It is. The best start.
Well, if you've been following the show for a while or if you're brand new, I want to remind people, because I feel like people still don't know, that there are video for these episodes available both on Spotify and YouTube. So if you want to look at us, I don't know if you want to do that, but you can. Sometimes we share pictures to kind of go along and tell the story about what we're talking about.
Don't be modest. You do a great job editing. Come on, guys. You needed to look at the pictures. We talk a lot about our history. I've been very insistent to Rebecca, and she's been gracious enough to, take a lot of time to edit these pictures, but they're very useful, Rebecca. A lot of people have given me feedback about that. We have a lot of art history followers now, so you have to keep it up for them.
Yes, we do. And then I also want to let people know that I always talk about Patreon, right? And my patrons. And I just need you to know that you can also become a free member on Patreon.
That's right.
And join the conversation. Yeah. So there's like a little community chat area where we all like to come together. I think that's the biggest thing when it comes to being a history lover is finding other like-minded people, right? That's why I do this. It was to find other people who are interested in what I'm interested in.
I learned so many things, guys, that I apply to what I write about, what I research about, and it changes my view on so many things. There's so many things I need to learn still. And I learn every day in all the comments and all the feedback. And by doing this too, I've said it before, just sitting here and talking and reflecting about what I'm learning every day is just a gift. So I like to share it with you.
Yeah, I think it's fun. And I want everybody to come join the Patreon community and chat with us and share your thoughts and let us know some ideas that you have. I think that's the most fun is the feedback that we get in the last episode.
All the wildest theories too, please. We're like, at this point.
Yeah.
Any poisonings, any, gruesome killings, any love stories that nobody knows about. Who knows?
I'm glad you added love stories because you're like poisonings and gruesome killings. I was like, it's kind of morbid.
Love stories with poisoning, like Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah,
that was written by Shakespeare. That's Tudor.
Yeah.
There you go.
It is. Okay, so our last episode, what was our last episode about?
Our last episode was about parallel lives. That's what we're doing, following on the footsteps of Plutarch, who, did not put the copyright on the idea, so we are allowed to do it, guys. Don't get ahead of yourselves. And he wrote a very influential book, and it's a simple idea, but a great one too, is just comparing two great people and seeing the differences, what teaches us about their uniqueness and their similarities, what teaches us about their time they lived in, and we had Dr. Alejandro Vergara Sharp from the Prado Museum to talk about, what did we talk about, Rebecca? Can you remind us?
Yes, we talked about Rubens and Velázquez.
Yes, very good.
Right? I don't know if I said that right.
And we didn't declare a winner, even though I tried to pull his leg and I try, and try to make sure he lost concentration talking about the Ninja Turtles. But what it came down to really, and what it taught us is a very good lesson, is that you can appreciate great people by comparing them too, and it teaches you things about the other one. When you're learning about Rubens, you're learning about Velázquez. And when you're learning about Velázquez, you learn about Rubens.
Yeah.
And then you got to meet him, and then you know a little about him and how he's also a cool guy. So I hope he can come back sometime.
Yeah, I would love to have him back. And we discussed too, something that we want to do with Dr. Emma and me is every fourth episode, we want to interview somebody, and we're kind of working on something for the next one, aren't we?
Yeah, we already have someone lined up. I'm so excited. It's going to be so cool.
Yeah.
And no clues, please, because I'm really bad at keeping secrets. Come on. So no, nothing.
Okay.
Don't make me say anything.
Okay, I
It's going to
won't.
be amazing.
I won't. Well, before we talk about today's episode, I do want to go back and do some of the listener feedback from our last episode
Mm.
that we were just discussing. And of course, the feedback on YouTube was amazing. People are
Yes.
still really enjoying the Parallel Live series. Dwayne over on YouTube says that he loves us working together. He said it's fun and informative. And he said, thank you for going into the art history. Being able to see the 15 to 1600s makes them so special.
So again, shout out to your editing skills. And I think, and Rebecca does, send me stuff and say, do you think this works? She's working hard, guys, to bring, a different experience. I don't see that in other podcasts. So shout out to you, Rebecca. You're doing a great job. I loved when we were comparing those pictures of when Alejandro was talking about comparing the pictures by Velázquez and Rubens about the same topic with that famous cow, Argus and Mercury. And, when you see the pictures, you can just really, really understand what he's talking about. So thank you very much for that. And you see the listeners are very grateful too. So
Yeah, that
I
makes
get
me
private
happy.
messages too, and everybody loved it. Everybody was super excited. The 90s kids were excited. The 90s kids who are 40 now were excited about it.
Well, the
So,
Ninja Turtles were a hit. I'd have to say, even my
yes.
family who are not into history like I am, I showed them the clip with the Ninja Turtles and they thought it was great.
Well, now what you need to do, and moving on from that, sometimes going back to being serious, you can go and learn about these people, Leonardo, Michelangelo, Donatello, and
Raphael,
Raphael. Very
you're
good.
testing me again.
Turtle power, right? No, but really, you can go in a very, very, very cool place called The Lives of the Famous Artists by Vasari. Giorgio Vasari was an Italian writer who wrote about the lives, the first famous art history book really about the lives of these
Oh.
famous guys. So I recommend everyone. This is can be accessed and open, so anyone can download it. Really, all those kids now that are loving the Ninja Turtles just because I mentioned it, you can go and download the Giorgio Vasari's Lives of the Famous Artists and learn about Michelangelo, but also about Susanna Horenboot because she's mentioned in there too.
Mm, exciting. Yeah,
Yeah.
this has been fun. Well, let's go back to listener feedback because Teresa over on YouTube said that you two girls are the best. I just had to read that
Oh,
because always need a
Teresa's
little
my friend. I asked her to. No, I'm only kidding. She is now. She is
right.
now.
We're gonna have to Venmo Teresa some money as a thank you.
Yes. Teresa, you'll
Um,
be getting your Venmo very soon. Check your phone.
Dwayne made another comment on YouTube that I have to read because he said Dr. Alejandro is awesome to offer his scholarly time to the humble community.
Oh, Alejandro's a very nice guy. Everybody's like, he's a big deal. He's a big deal, but he's also a super nice person. Very interested in what people have to say about
Yeah.
art. Very open always to talk about art and discuss just how art really makes us feel, how it really is it's an experience that is very unique, and that's why he always talks about museums being success stories. I just read in the news that the Prado Museum has received up to today more visits than previously in the 5 years up to today. So that means that people want to see art, and I think in this we don't talk about the current world here because who wants to talk about the current world? But in the current world we live, I think museums and art and amazing art, like the art of Rubens and Velázquez, can help us get through this time in this current world. So it's
Yeah.
a great excuse to go to a museum just to be like, I'm just going to indulge in
Yeah.
beautiful things today, right?
Do it. Do it. I can't wait
Yeah.
to go and get a tour of the Prado 2026, right?
Everybody wants a tour of the Prado. What are you waiting for?
Oh, well, what else do we have here for listener feedback? People are just really happy
That
about,
was a great comment, by the way.
yeah,
It's just great to see how appreciative people are. And that's why it's my mission to just bring the best guests. So,
yeah.
yeah.
I'm excited for our upcoming guest. Over on Patreon, Deidre said that we're not boring at all. So I think I remember talking about being boring in the last episode or boring people
There's a
or
glitch in our brains, and we're never boring. It's just, to people who are not interested in these types of things. There's a
yeah.
lot of people who are not interested in this. That's okay. Not
Yeah.
everybody has to be interested in the same things. And that's why I think it's so important to build community, because sometimes you feel alone when you like
Yeah.
something very much. Or you can feel very close to the people who are far away when you have connections to those people. So, building community, again, in this current world we're living, is better
Yes.
than ever. So
We need
that's
it.
what I think social media and has good, it's a good thing about social media,
Yeah.
because we also know social media is very criticized, and these types of even podcasts are very criticized for being too many and this and that. Well, no, we need connections with like-minded people, and that's very important, at least to me, and I know what works for me.
Well, you know what? Podcasts are no different than, let's say, TV sitcoms or series. I mean, look how many
Exactly.
there are. So we shouldn't
We're
be
just two
judged.
comedians here talking about
That's
here.
right. Well, the other thing Deidre said, which you mentioned, was, she said, I have no friends who want to talk about this stuff.
Exactly.
And she said, please keep doing it. It makes me feel like I have you guys as friends also. So I love that.
Good. We are friends, of course. And I have friends who are not interested in this either.
Yeah.
It's okay. They're still my friends for other reasons, and that's
Yeah.
good. That's good. We also should have friends who don't have our same interests and connect on other things. We should try and find connecting points with people. But when you are passionate about something, like I am, for example, about art history, and you are about Tudor history, and that kind of marches in because I study that period. It's just a great way to have a healthy relationship to a passion, right?
Yes, for
Yeah.
sure. Well, I'm excited. I want to get into today's topic. This is episode 5 of our
We're
parallel
not moving
lives.
that far in many ways and respects, I think. First of all, because it's still parallel lives.
Yeah, it is
That's the
still.
important part, right? That we're still doing this because I think people are loving it. And, when something works, why would you try to fix it, right?
Yeah.
So you wanna introduce we'll get back to the
Yeah.
ladies, because although we love the cool dudes, and I am in awe of how cool Rubens and Velasquez were, but I think we still need to talk about the ladies a lot more.
Yes, I think we do too. And today we're talking about one lady that I've wanted to learn more about, and I kind of hinted at this in a previous episode, who it was Mary of Hungary. So
Oh
we're
yes.
looking at Mary of Hungary today and Margaret Roper, the daughter
Oh,
of Sir Thomas More.
yes. And with this, I think it's just started with their names. These women have many names, and this is something I talk about when I talk about, my good friend Catherine of Aragon. Sometimes the names of the women can be confusing, right? So, and in this case, it's more when you explain the kind of connections to men usually that you understand, because these women change names, and we give them names for posterity. Historians gave them names that they're not quite sometimes the names that they were given at the time. Where I'm going with this is saying Mary of Hungary was born Mary of Austria. She was a Habsburg. She was sister to Charles V.
Yes, I remembered this now. Last time I was getting so confused by the family tree. So Charles
Okay.
V is her brother, but her parents are
Okay.
Juana and Crybaby.
Yes, good job, Philip of Habsburg.
Yes.
And you remember Charles V was born in Ghent,
In the toilet.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Rebecca.
In case you're new to the show, we must remind you. Otherwise, if you've heard it before, sorry if it's getting old.
Yeah, and then we like a little potty joke once in a while because we relate to the 5-year-olds. Um, but in any case, Mary of Hungary is his sister, his younger sister. She was born in 1505. On the other hand, parallel lives. I don't know why we haven't talked about these women before in the podcast. The other woman that we're going to talk about, she was born the same year, and we said Margaret Roper. She was the daughter of Sir Thomas More. So really, the connection with the previous episode. Remember that we talked with Alejandro that Rubens painted a picture of Thomas More that is now in the Prado and is one of the best.
Yes.
When Alejandro likes a painting, there's a reason for it, and he's interested in that painting. First of all, because it talks about that genealogy of art history that he was talking about, how Rubens is copying Holbein, right? Because this picture is a very famous picture and who doesn't know, who can't close their eyes and see Sir Thomas More in their brains because of Holbein, right? That's why we have an emotional connection to the Tudors that we don't have with maybe the Lancasters that we love, and we should do parallel lives of the Lancasters too, and the Yorks and all that. But that emotional connection that we get with, the Thomas Mores, the family of Thomas More, because one of the most famous paintings by Holbein is a picture of the family of Thomas More.
Yeah, there's so much going on in that painting too. You could stare at it for hours.
You could, because it's a very complex painting, There's many references. There's references to culture, to humanism, to the role in society. But have you noticed there's plenty of women in it, isn't there?
There are a lot of women in it, which I love.
Yes, and that represents really the humanist family at the time. And Sir Thomas More was the humanist father by quintessential, like in that sense, the most. His daughters, Margaret Roper, was born the same year as Mary of Hungary, was born in England, and we're in 1505. We're talking about the fact that in 1499, I think it is when Elizabeth of York and Margaret Beaufort write a letter to Isabel of Castile telling Catherine of Aragon to learn French with Margaret of Austria because no lady in the Tudor court speaks Spanish or Latin. And Margaret Roper ends up speaking Latin, Greek, translating Erasmus from Latin into English. One of the most accomplished humanists of Europe, regardless of her gender, being a woman. She was just a very accomplished person because her father was a very accomplished man that became obsessed with the education of his daughters.
Yeah. And it's interesting when we look at the parents of these two women because they are so different. Thomas More came from much more humble beginnings than the parents of Mary of Hungary, who, of course, were born into royalty.
But he was an intellectual at a time that was cool. So he is a cool guy, even though his head ended up on a spike in the Tower of London.
Oh, we're going there, are we?
Oh, yeah, we're going there. Let's start it early on so we can talk about it.
I feel like that's probably one of the stories from Tudor history that kind of makes you cringe a little bit because I think I think the story goes that Margaret went and removed her father's head from
Bloody Henry and Bloody Anne, by the way, because Anne Boleyn was totally happy with Thomas More's head being on a spike.
Right.
So, someone who is now praised as a leading reformist and advocate for women's education, she really wasn't that, because who really was an advocate for women's education was Thomas More.
Yes,
and she was okay with him being executed because he wouldn't accept the act of succession and the act of supremacy, which Anne Boleyn was involved in, as Henry VIII was. So these people were really despicable during this time too. We have to talk about that, How can you do that to someone who you've admired since you were a child. I'm talking about Henry now.
Yeah.
Tool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's hard to like. You have to be. I think Henry by this time was just having probably some sort of delirium, some sort of mental problem because it's not normal, really, what happened to and
No.
Thomas was one of the first ones, really, imagine the waves that the shock in Europe. He was the one to write the coronation poem of Henry and Catherine, calling her Catherine of Spain, not
Mm.
Catherine of Aragon.
Yes.
They had a close relationship. They dined together. They had talks about philosophy. So Catherine of Aragon had talks about philosophy with Thomas More, with Juan Luis Vives, and Henry couldn't get enough of Thomas More until he shoved him to his side, imprisoned him, and finally killed him and put his head on a spike on the
Yeah.
Tower of London. That's hard.
This was a brutal time to live, and I think we often gloss over the fact that it was like that and
I don't.
focus on the other things.
Did I
Okay.
gloss over it? Do you
No, no,
want me to
you
do that?
didn't. I'm just saying people in general
Yeah.
tend to gloss over it and focus
But
on.
if you're a Henry VIII fan, I think there's one or two out there. I've heard some people, oh, I'm going to be devil's advocate and I'm going to defend Henry VIII, and I'm like, why? And sorry to say, I know this is not going to make me very popular in certain places, but if you're an Anne Boleyn fan, you have to admit her involvement in this.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
pushed away fun guy. She pushed away Thomas More. She pushed away all of Henry's friends, really. He
Yes,
had
she
to get
did.
a new set of friends after his relationship with her.
Yeah.
That, in my book, is a red flag, and that's toxic behavior on both parts, not just Henry's part, you know?
Yeah.
But
It.
anyway, talking back to the Moors, imagine that. So after the head is on a spike for a week, Margaret Roper bribes a guy who's supposed to throw it on the Thames, takes it home. So he gives her father's head. She takes it home and she pickles it. She keeps it until she dies, and then her husband keeps it and is buried with the head of Thomas More.
Whoa.
What do you
I,
need? The pickles or the head?
I
No, just the
don't.
pickles.
I don't even.
When did
Okay.
she keep that?
I. That's so disgusting. But
Sorry, but it's the truth.
I mean, wouldn't you just bury it somewhere, make it into your own
But
shrine
at
to
that
your
point,
father?
he was a saint.
Yeah. Well,
So that was a
he didn't
relic.
become a saint until like the
He
1900s
was
sometime.
considered. Catherine of Aragon's letters were considered. She was considered a saint. I mean, saints are built during
Mm.
the lifetime if they go through martyrdom. So that word is always very difficult. So I think she kept his letters, and then so she died. I think 14 years before her husband, and he kept everything. And he wrote the first biography of Thomas More. So they were writing the biography of a saint. So that's why they kept his head. It was a relic.
Oh,
The the attorney who was defending Catherine of Aragon for Empress Isabel in Rome once wrote that Catherine of Aragon's letters in Rome were considered relics because she
really?
was gone. Yeah. I mean, these people, this is the advent of the Reformation, but also the Counter Reformation. And so Thomas More became an icon of the Catholic faith and the consequences of defending that in England.
Wow. Okay, so we're talking parallel lives then. So now let's look
Yeah.
at Mary of Hungary and the death of her father and the story that goes with that,
Well,
right?
yes, yes. So Mary of Hungary really doesn't meet her father because Crybaby dies when she's just after she's born.
Wow.
But really, she's raised by her grandfather, Emperor Maximilian. So totally different ballgame, right? She's the marketing. She's the marketing mother number two. The marketing mother number one is Margaret of Austria, her aunt, who raises her in Michelin along with Charles V. And she looks a lot like Charles. She you can see in her paintings, but also she's also because she's of this powerful family, she's used in the marriage alliances that the Habsburgs are very famous for, and that's how she becomes Mary of Hungary, because she marries the king of Hungary and
Mm.
Bohemia. That's why she becomes Mary of Hungary. But really, she's Mary of Austria, really, all of the House of Habsburg, whatever you want to call her, right?
Yeah.
The reason why she becomes so famous is not because of her marriage, because her her husband is killed in 1526, very important year, also for the Tudor court, in a very crucial battle for the empire, in the Battle of Mohacs against the Ottoman Empire. So she becomes a widow. She becomes just like Margaret of Austria. She retires, but she becomes a governor for her brother Charles when Margaret dies in 1530, and takes on that same role of becoming a patron of the arts because she's ruling in a place, the Netherlands. Flemish art is flourishing there. Alejandro told us all about it. And he actually has studied Isabel Clara Eugenia and Rubens, they are heirs of these women. You know, it's the women in the Spanish monarchy when they go into the Habsburg Netherlands, they just encounter these amazing artists and become marketing mothers. So Mary of Hungary has the largest collection, for example, of paintings by Titian in the 16th century. And this is not all things that I know because I've been researching her a lot. I read this book, Mary of Hungary, Renaissance Patron and Collector, Gender, Art and Culture. It was edited by my PhD advisor, Noelia Garcia Perez from the University of Murcia, who is also the scientific director of this initiative that the director of the Prado Museum, Miguel Falomir, started to showcase women's importance in the foundation of the Prado Museum, but also the collection, because the collection started before the museum, because it's the royal collection. So Mary of Hungary was one of the main actors in the first edition of this, The Female Perspective, a few years back, that had, there's many documentaries and there's a lot of information in their website about Mary of Hungary that you guys should check out because it's amazing.
Yeah, she was important. I have to go back now to what I was trying to get you to talk about. We're looking at
did I just go on a here?
Well, I just wanted to make a comparison with Margaret Roper taking her father's head and when Crybaby died and the story about Juana and what she did with him.
Yes. So Mary, let's call her Mary of Hungary, but now we know, right? Yes. She's the daughter of Juana the First of Castile and Philip of Habsburg. So she's born in 1505, the same year as Margaret Roper, the daughter of Sir Thomas More, who we're doing parallel lives with. And we'll get to the point why I chose them for parallel lives, okay? This is not, just bear with us, guys. So, but let's get to the story. So she's born, and the next year, her parents are in Castile. After going to the court of Henry VII, by the way, and being there and seeing them, they end up in Burgos. And we've talked a lot about Burgos. Maybe you should pin that episode that I talked about 20 minutes about Burgos and why you should go there. And Fernando of Aragon poisons, basically, Philip of Crybaby for crying too much. And I wish that Fernando and Henry VIII had met, because he'd taken care of that quickly.
Yes.
Like, oh, boy, it's so annoying. Just bring the guy that we used last time, please.
Yeah, let's get this kid out of the way. So
basically, it was, the rumor was that Philip was poisoned shortly after Fernando of Aragon left Burgos, throwing Juana into a desperation mode because she was pregnant with her last daughter, Catherine. Nothing gets more dramatic than the Trastámaras and the Habsburgs.
Yeah. Did she carry his body around with her? That's always the story you hear, right?
That's always the story. She's a bit like Margaret, too. So now we see a little bit of these women tend to be crazy, or they just put through so much that they're just answering to traumatic events that are too hard to bear sometimes, It's just too much. I wouldn't have kept his head. Sorry, Dad. I wouldn't have kept your head. I would have buried it somewhere. I couldn't.
I think it's fascinating because I hadn't even thought about that when we talked about doing an episode on these two women, that was a parallel thing kind of in their lives with their fathers. I
know until you mentioned it now. The reason why I chose them, let's also talk about that. These women are connected to very important artists and humanists. So Erasmus of Rotterdam, we've mentioned, right? But
Yes.
also Hans Holbein the Younger. Margaret Roper is painted in that famous family picture, obviously, but also Holbein does a little miniature of her that ends up with a miniature of her husband now in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, NY City, my favorite city in the United States, to be honest with you, Rebecca.
I thought that was Minneapolis.
Yes, to live in, to
Oh.
visit and have a fun time. New York, come on. I'm not gonna lie. New York is just amazing. I love it. I love it. So in the Met is one of the best museums in the world for a reason, and they have miniatures by Holbein of Margaret and her husband that I found a little mention to them in a letter from Erasmus where he mentions Mary of Hungary and how she's very interested in keeping in touch with the daughters of Thomas More.
Oh.
Mary of Hungary also met Holbein when Holbein was sent by Henry VIII to paint Christina of Denmark, right? Now in the National Portrait,
That
now in the National Gallery of Art in London,
a
right?
beautiful portrait, full length.
More editing to do.
I know. I'm giving myself more work as we talk. Stop bringing up people.
Stop bringing up pictures of people, Emma. You should just start a bank of pictures that I mentioned. I talk about the same pictures a lot, you know. And Holbein is just going to be, I'm going to talk a lot about Holbein. Holbein was part of my dissertation topic. I mean, I was the one to really say for the first time that he was connected to Catherine of Aragon and that he came because of that influence that she had, right?
Yeah.
He's always been famous, but I think he's regaining a new fame, especially because I'm very excited for this. There's a new book by Elizabeth Goldring coming out later this year on Holbein, a new artistic biography. She wrote an amazing artistic biography about Nicholas Hilliard, so this is going to be very exciting.
Yes, I love it. I feel like we need more of that. We need more
We need art
academic work.
historians, real art
Yes.
historians like Dr. Elizabeth Goldring, to write about
Yeah.
giants of art like Holbein, who's a giant in European art, not just in English art, not just for Tudor art, for Western art. He's truly, I mean, amazing.
Yeah. I
Amazing.
think I want to clarify something too, because I think when we talk about art historians and the importance of art historians, I don't want to take away from the fact that we love that people are so interested in art history and have a passion for it and want to do their own research. I don't want to kind of isolate those people in this episode and make them feel like they don't know what they're doing. But when it comes to telling the history of art, who better to do it than an art historian?
Right, right. I mean, it's like everything, you know, you train to do something and there's we apply a method to the analysis of the art of the time. So, you know, and someone like Elizabeth Goldring, who's already done this for such a big artist as Nicholas Hilliard too.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be an amazing biography, and I'm really excited for it, especially because I think there's a lot of we need to stay critical with the content too, you know? Everybody can have interests and everybody can write about things. But then when you want to do a good study, I personally go to, you know, I'm an art historian. If I want to know something related to that, I go to my peers to
Mm.
see what they're writing about. So yeah, I am very excited. There's very good books on Holbein too already. So this is just coming it's just a very rich field because it's such a fascinating artist too.
Yeah. We always,
There's a lot of other content that is wrong out there too, you know. So if you want the real deal, buy Elizabeth's book. Yeah, it's
yes.
going to be. I'm definitely going to read it.
When did you say that's coming out?
So she's published it in Yale. So later this year, I think it's got like a UK launch and a American launch.
I
Yeah,
feel
I think
like
later
maybe,
this year, November. I think October, November.
okay. I feel like
I think
this
you can
is
pre-order already. So
okay. We'll have to get her lined up to be on Dr. Emma.
Yes, we do. Actually, now we put her on the spot. Hi, Elizabeth.
Yeah, this is good because we love Hans Holbein the Younger. He is the best known.
His work. I'm in love with his work.
Yeah, I am too.
And everybody who has, I think this is where people who like art and use it as a hobby and really good specialists agree. Because I've been talking to Alejandro, for example, about Holbein, and he always says the same thing. He's one of the big ones. He's amazing. Yeah. It's just his art transmits something that other artists don't do. It's just, we tend to talk a lot about the great artists of the Renaissance. There is a few, but Holbein in this other side that is not just the Italian side where all the Ninja Turtles were, in the North, there's giant names too. Maybe we should start a new show about North. Jura, Holbein,
This has really just become a brainstorming session between you and I.
There you go.
All right, let's get back to the two women. We have this tendency to
Margaret
veer off.
Roper was painted by Holbein, and this miniature is mentioned in a letter. So Erasmus, letters. What I'm saying is, humanist culture is bigger than just the writings. Erasmus is very involved in the revolution of portraiture and the arrival of Holbein to England.
Yeah.
It's through Erasmus that he arrives to England to live with Thomas More. Mm-hmm. Come on. So, fun guy. So we need to stop putting especially in the late 20s, we need to stop putting the ones in the Protestant field and the ones in the Catholic field because they're all mixed up still. Okay.
Yeah.
And then later on, it's still the same. And Holbein comes to do a lot of things too. And he ends up working for Henry and Anne and Henry, and he dies in England. So we need to study these women too, because he's very closely connected. So Margaret Roper met Holbein, lived with Holbein, because Holbein lived in the house of Thomas More, and then met Mary of Hungary when he went to paint Christina of Denmark. Picture again.
Yeah. Yeah, he really got around.
So what I'm saying is, by studying these women, we're seeing at Holbein from another angle, because we don't have a lot of biographical data about Holbein. So remember, Alejandro also said it shouldn't be a problem if his work portfolio is big, but still, if we can still approach him from these other lives, especially the women that haven't been as studied as the men have. We know a lot about Holbein and Thomas More. We know a lot about Holbein and Henry. We know less about Mary and Holbein and Margaret Roper and Holbein. So
yeah.
So interesting, isn't it?
It is. I love it.
And then Holbein also is involved with another woman, very famous. We'll have to do a parallel lives of Susanna Horenboot.
Writing this down.
And Lavina Turnick, probably.
Oh, yeah, that would be a good one. If
maybe I thought that this morning at 5 a.m. when I woke up, and I just thought it again now.
Well, if you think that's a good idea, comment and let us know if you want us to do an episode.
Oh, I thought you were talking to me. I was like, okay, comment and let her know.
No, you just told me.
See, this is just a conversation amongst friends, really.
Yes, yeah, it is. Okay, so we have Mary of Hungary, Margaret Roper. What else do these two women have in common that we might not know?
Or not in common. Margaret dies way before Mary.
Oh.
Margaret dies in 1544, which is a pivotal year, really. That's when Susanna Horenboot, for example, is mentioned in Mary Tudor's Privy Purse Expenses. So 1544 is when Elizabeth and Mary are back in the succession. Catherine Parr is new Queen of England, and Margaret dies, but her husband carries on the More legacy, like we said, with the head, but also, sorry, I can't get over it. I've always been that person who cannot get over it.
The pickled head.
Pickled head of Sir Thomas More. That would have been useful if an artist would have wanted, to maybe, He's like, oh, do you want to pick another picture of Thomas More? Sure, we've got his head right there with with the peaches.
What's happening right now?
Anyway, so she dies in 1544, and he inherits the head and the writings, and he writes the first biography. He lives on. On the other hand, Mary of Hungary becomes very, very, very relevant when Margaret is already dead. So even though they're born the same, that also tells you about if you have a long life, like, for example, Elizabeth the First of England, you can do many things. Whereas if you have a shorter life because something happens to you, because you die, because you're a woman and you die more, and, no, the men died in the war, but, Mary lives on. But Mary also dies in 1558, the same year Mary the First of England dies. So she's cousins, and that's why I'm mentioning a lot Mary the First of England. Mary of Hungary and Mary of England were cousins, lived very close by, never met in person, but yes, we're sending each other stuff. We know that Mary sent a picture by Titian of Prince Philip to Mary when she became Queen of England for the marriage of, that marriage that happened and Philip became King of England, right? We all know about that.
Yeah.
Then Antonis More was sent to England to paint Mary in that very famous portrait now in Alejandro's collection in the Prado Museum. It had been previously Mary of Hungary and who had sent Antonis More to the Portuguese court. She was more involved in those things that we previously thought until this book came out, Noelia's book, and all the content that created for the female perspective in the Prado. So now we know that Mary is really the marketing mastermind behind Titian, behind a lot of these, and the construction of that image of the Habsburgs as these powerful, powerful people. She owned, for example, a very famous painting in the Prado Museum that depicts Charles V after the Battle of Mühlberg. So he's got a nice Instagram filter on his face, so he doesn't have his big chin, because he's grown a beard, which is the makeup guys used in the 16th century to look
They still do. They still do.
They still do. That's right. That's right. I'm going to say something that's two things that are not going to make me very popular in this episode. I like a clean shaved face, to be honest with you. I'm not a big fan of beards.
I'm the opposite.
Did you know Catherine of Aragon was the same? Because
Really?
Henry VIII grew a beard because Francis I had a beard.
Yes.
She told Henry she didn't like it. I'm like Catherine. I'm with Catherine in this one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I like me a nice not a beard, a nicely trimmed one. I don't want like a big, long, gross one that can catch everything in it.
Oh, Rebecca, please. Okay.
Well, like I think of the one that we see in Thomas Seymour's portrait in his miniature. That was like
you want to talk about Thomas Seymour and his beard? Maybe you have a crush on Thomas Seymour.
I don't have a crush on Thomas Seymour. I like beards, but nicely trimmed ones.
Yeah, sure. Nobody's perfect.
Anyway.
No, who are we talking about again?
How do we? Oh, we were talking about beards. Henry VIII's beard.
Yes. So that was a rabbit hole.
The filters. That's what we were talking about.
Oh, Charles V in Mühlberg and his beard that makes him look very different to the picture that we were talking about of Charles V that was sent to Mary Rose Tudor in 1514. Is the same guy, looks totally different.
Yeah, he does.
The beard. And because he's on a horse and it looks spectacular because it's Titian too, right?
Yeah.
That is in the Prado Museum. But also Mary of Hungary, who we see in her pictures later in life as this very chaste woman, because she's a widow in her pictures, dressed like a widow. She also asked Titian to paint very saucy pictures of nude men. So these women are more than just, these pious patrons of religious altarpieces. They also like to have nude men in their palaces because this is a Renaissance.
Yes.
So Titian did. And two of them are still in the Prado Museum. And they depict, so because it's a Renaissance, they're depicting scenes from mythology where these giants are being punished for going against the main god, Jupiter. But in this case, it would be Charles V, because this is a way to tell the people who would visit her in Kudenberg, in her palace where these pictures were displayed, we are powerful. And the German princes decided to go against Charles by becoming Protestant. Look what happened to them, because we are the Habsburgs and we have the power and the best artists.
Yes. Okay, now I want to talk about something, and this isn't something that we talked about beforehand, but next week I have an episode coming out on Margaret of Angoulême. And
Ooh.
and because I think we've talked about her on the show before, and when we talk about marketing mothers, she was worked into that whole thing with Margaret of Austria and Mary of Hungary too, right?
We talked about her about pirates too.
Yes, we did. My favorite
And
episode.
oh, eye roll. This is why you have to see the videos, guys. She just did the biggest eye roll just because one gets excited talking about parrots, because has some hyperfixation issues. And Mel was here to Taylor to talk about parrots, and she knows a lot about that. And Rebecca wasn't just having the best time, but that picture of Marguerite de Angoulême with the parrot is just, it shows you how cool the Renaissance is. It looks like it was painted yesterday because of the vibrant colors. And that parrot, you're like, what's the parrot doing there? Can he say anything? What is he up to? Why does she have a parrot? Well, like Catherine had a monkey, right? With her. This is to show that you are a very cool lady, a very cool marketing mother. Marguerite and the women in the French court, I think one of the problems they had is that there was a Salic law that prevented them from ever ruling, but they were regents on some occasions, and there were advisors, and above all, like all the women in the Renaissance, usually were peacemakers.
Yes, yes. Okay, so Mary of Hungary has some connection in my Thomas Seymour research because he was an ambassador to the Low Countries in the 1540s, and there are plenty of letters where you see the communication where he was there, and then somebody.
Did he mention things about art?
I don't think there's any mention about art. It's more just what they were discussing about diplomacy.
What we're discussing about diplomacy? Tell us.
I don't put me on the spot. I don't.
Of course.
I don't remember.
Did you do your homework? So there was a Thomas Seymour connection with Mary of Hungary, and you didn't research about this?
I thought about this beforehand, how I should have pulled up some of the letters so that we could use them, but I didn't.
Okay, what was the year? We can work it out.
Gosh, I would say, well, probably, I'm going to guess about 1543-ish.
Right, that's totally an interesting time because, of course, in my research at least, Catherine of Aragon is already dead, but Mary Tudor maintains a lot of connections to her family in the Low Countries in Spain. Yeah. And in her Privy Purse expenses that are from this time, there's mentions to that. And Susanna is mentioned, who's a Fleming who comes from the court of Margaret of Austria. And then Lavina Turnlick comes also. And Bassari tells us it was Henry VIII who married her to an Englishman, but Bassari was a dude. Of course, he was going to say the Tulle was the one responsible, but the women had a lot of influence.
Yeah.
And this through correspondence, and this is why I want you to go back to those letters and read them again. We have already uncovered at least one discovery with your research that mentioned to the paint tricks. Remember we talked about that? So I was very successful finding stuff, and I am still, in letters and diplomacy, because these women sometimes don't leave as hard evidence in, like, the financial records, especially in Catherine Aragon's place, sense, or Mary when she's young, because they were destroyed. So it's very interesting. I think you need to go back and check those. Maybe we'll do a second part.
I've been kind of on a little hiatus from writing my book on Thomas Seymour.
That's when everybody needs to comment that she needs to get on her book right away.
If it makes you feel any better, I did open up the document last night and start reading one of the chapters and doing some editing on it. But there's so much I have to refresh my memory on all the research that I've done over the years. And I think those letters were all about Thomas trying to find support from her for this war that they were going to be helping with Maximilian, maybe it was.
Ferdinand the First. So this is very
Yes, it was like
interesting.
the Siege of Pest and another one. I don't
Buddha
remember.
and Pest.
Yeah.
Yes, so that is connected, Rebecca. Now you need to get writing this book because that is connected to my exhibition coming up in the British Museum on the
Interesting.
9th of
Coming up
July.
very soon.
Ooh, it just gives me goosebumps just to think about it. Because there is a medal depicting this Battle of Mohawks that she has made when her husband dies. And once that happens, she uses that's why she's Mary of Hungary. She uses that image as a widow to try to defend that territory from becoming part of the Ottoman Empire by claiming and helping her brother, who is the heir in the empire to Charles V. We're getting deep in the Habsburgs now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Ferdinand the First, okay, and his wife, she's from Bohemia. So they're trying to defend the Habsburg rule there. That's why you will have heard of Seymour talking about these things because they are there, they're involved. But how important are these people? I wanted to bring, for example, something I have right here, just laying around. The New Year's gifts of 1557 of Mary the First of England, okay? And I brought these up previously. But for example, on that year when Mary the First was receiving gifts in Christmas time, so the 1st of January, she's already married to Philip of Spain, and he's already king of Spain. So they're at the height of their power, right?
Yeah.
A man called Sir Henry Newell gave the Queen a lute in a case. We've talked about this before, covered with black silk and gold. You know, a bit of bling, with 2 little round black tables. The one of the physiognomy of the emperor and the king's majesty, the other one of the king of Bohemia and his wife. I've thought a lot about this because it's like right at the before everybody dies.
Yeah.
Charles V dies, and Charles V dies in retirement. So there's like 2 kings at the same time. So the king of Bohemia is this Ferdinand that you're talking about as then the one that when they're doing all the siege of Pest and all that, because that's an area of Europe I would not need to study. I know Noelia has done a lot of research on that, so maybe one day we can. She's so busy. Maybe we have to put her in the spot and invite her to the podcast live.
Yeah, I think we should.
Sorry, Noelia.
This is what we're going to do moving forward, is just put people on the spot.
Yeah. Henry Cavill. Listen to us.
Pedro Pascal.
I knew. Good job. I knew you had to bring those 2 up. Yes.
Yeah. We like those guys.
So we need those people. We need Noelia, Henry Cavill, and we need Pedro Pascal. Did we put anyone else on the spot? Oh, Elizabeth Goldring too.
Oh yeah.
Okay, that's a good start.
I think it's a good start. It's a good list to start on. We have 10 goals.
What do you think about this? Isn't that cool that in London somebody's given this lute? We know that Mary was a very, very accomplished musician. Like in that sense, she was very much like her father, Henry VIII. It'd be interesting to do a parallel lives, Henry VIII, Mary the First.
Oh.
Those fights must have been epic between Henry and Mary. The tension.
Yeah.
Like obey, and she's like, nope.
I like our parallel lives, but I like it that we pick 2 really different people. Like Mary and Henry are father and daughter. I like it when we pick like somebody from England and somebody from Spain and find those parallels. I think it's kind of fun.
And in this sense, you see how even though apparently they're so different, these women are connected. And they have a direct connection because Mary of Hungary since Erasmus seems to be the guy who's involved. He's like the matchmaker of all these women. All these humanists are very involved with the women.
Yeah, well, they're smart.
Very close. Yeah, they like to hang out with the ladies. Juan Luis Vives writes about this. Writes about how Isabel of Castile was the first one to enable this, with Antonio de Nebrija, who wrote the first grammar book for Spanish. We've talked about her, Beatriz Galindo, La Latina, the Latinist woman. It's just very smart people getting together. Who
Yeah,
doesn't like that?
I love that.
And it's not just the men, like, in Greek times or in the Roman times, the men were the ones usually allowed to have these discussions. In the Renaissance, the women are part of these discussions. And Mary of Hungary was, and Noelia talks about this. I encourage you guys to go and see all the documentaries in the female perspective. Mary of Hungary was called the most vigilant and attentive mind in Europe of her time. People would say things of her like if she would have been a man, she would have been the greatest monarch ever.
Wow.
But they would say things like that about Catherine of Aragon too. Juan Luis
Mm.
Vives said, it's just these women are prepared to rule, even though they don't rule, but they do rule. They rock.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that was a statement and a half.
Well, I feel like I'm looking at the time here, and we started late because somebody was late. So I'm not really sure. We got to be getting close
2
to.
minutes.
But I
Let me
feel
just mention 5 other pictures. So I'm going to make your afternoon very entertaining.
this is how Emma punishes me now, is by mentioning a bunch of portraits and paintings, so that I have to put them
Exactly.
into the. Well,
Thank you very much.
feel like we need to finish off with any other parallels between Mary of Hungary and Margaret Roper that you can think of.
Very loyal, extremely loyal. So Mary of Hungary was extremely loyal to Maximilian and Charles V and her brother and her dynasty. And Margaret Roper too, to
Yeah.
her father and her husband and her legacy. She was a translator. She translated from Greek. I mean, how accomplished do you have to be able to do that, right? But Mary of Hungary too, they just had different roles, but they were extremely educated. I think, to me, the power of education. And in that way, men and women are the same. You educate people, you give them critical thinking skills. I'm just going to be an old lady now. I think people are losing that a little bit.
Yeah.
I think people are going off their minds because they're not applying their critical thinking skills that we learn from reading, from reflecting on what we read, listening to a podcast, but a good one like this one. That's my favorite.
No, I think you make a great point, because really, sometimes I think when we're researching, people lead by emotion instead of critical thinking. And it's important to don't make this. She's making a face at me. If you're not watching,
I mean, I want to
this.
say something. I get a lot of messages from people saying, why don't you talk more about TV shows? And like, Catherine Marron and all these TV shows. And I'm like, because that's not what I do. That's part of it. I can mention that. I can talk about it. But what I want to do is to raise awareness that this woman was famous beyond measure in her lifetime. Probably with her mother, probably the most famous woman. And that's why we had Mary the First and Elizabeth the First, for example.
Mm-hmm.
It's because she changed the way people thought about women in England. That's what I'm trying to do. That's not by analyzing if that actress wore the right garment, or if, she had
Her hair was the right color.
or she had, yes. Okay, don't get me started with the hair thing. Nobody has better hair than Dr. Emma, actually.
How did this turned about you all of a sudden?
All of a sudden, it's all about me. No, it's true. It's. Let's move beyond that. The other day, I got really upset. Sorry to say, and Rebecca has a few videos on this, I think, about did Arthur and Catherine do it? I'm like, I'm over it. I can't do it anymore. Let's talk about these other things. It's so interesting.
Yes.
The parallel lives of Mary of Hungary and Margaret Roper, who probably a lot of people would never have paralleled with, but they do, and the connection is Holbein. That's a guy I would invite to dinner, to talk to him and be like, dude, you gave a face to all the Tudor court.
Yeah.
We'll have to do him at some point in Parallel Lives.
I would love that. I feel like there's so much to discuss when it comes to him and his work.
I did ask you in the previous episode, who would you pair him with? Are you ready to say who you think you would?
With Holbein?
Yeah.
Wow. I'm not an art historian, so I don't know who I would pair
Well,
him
that's
with.
the magic of it, of this, is you can just, you know, we've been doing a few of these, you know how it works.
Yeah, I still don't have an answer.
Would you pair him with Thomas Seymour? They were both diplomats. I mean, I think we think Holbein as this amazing artist. Levina Turnick was paid more money than him. So we should maybe rethink about him as a diplomat, like rethink Susanna Hornbloot as a diplomat. To diplomats like Rubens are very important. And even the ones that are not famous painters have usually critical artistic skills because they're seeing the world and they're seeing all these artworks. And they're going to Gutenberg to see that amazing picture of Charles V after the Battle of Mühlberg that Thomas Seymour saw for sure.
Yeah.
And, that gives you a different sensitivity, right? So that's why he was asking for a painting of his beloved, wasn't he? In that letter?
I really would love to find a parallel life with Thomas Seymour because obviously I know a
You've
lot
got
about him.
homework to do.
Yikes. I have a lot of homework all the time. With all these pictures that you've added to this episode.
This is the course in art history, Rebecca. Hold on.
I just have so much fun talking about these people in history with you because I learned so much. I feel like you know so much about things that I don't know. And we've talked about this before where it's like I teach you things, you teach me things. And
we get the comments from the people, we learn new things.
Yes.
We get to be a bit silly, I think there was a comment or two where people were not too impressed with my, skills in joking, but you know what? This is who I am, and I like it. So I'm just gonna do my thing.
Well, this is what Dr. Emma and me is. It's the
Yeah,
two of us just being ourselves, talking about
yeah,
history. My Tuesday episodes are the ones where I just interview somebody.
yeah. Did you hit record?
Yes, I did hit
Oh,
record.
good. Remember that time we talked for 2 hours and you hadn't know?
This has never happened.
It will, and it'll be okay too. It'll be
Yeah,
okay. I always have fun talking to you. We talk a lot when we're not recording.
we
Thank
do.
God.
Yeah, you don't want to know what we're talking about most of the time.
No.
But this has been a lot of fun today looking at Mary of Hungary and Margaret Roper and
You guys
finding.
will love their pictures. Rebecca's gonna do and shout out again. I know you were working a lot more to do this, but it's worth it, and it'll be worth it because these are by Holbein, by Vermeyen. These are very very cool pictures too. So
Yeah. And it does help. It helps tell the story when you use
and then
it
you
with
cover
this.
that picture of Henry you always have there.
I know nobody ever sees it because I crop him out. So
I do. It's just for me, guys. I repeat myself in the podcast. I've said this before. You put that guy there to make me nervous.
I do. I do it for everybody. Anybody I interview gets to see Henry on my door behind me, but when you, the viewers, watch it, he's cropped out.
I'm gonna get a Thomas More poster
Okay, where are you going to put it? I don't think I'll see it.
right there. Maybe.
All right, you can do that. If you want a Thomas More poster, go for it. I would think you'd want a Catherine of Aragon one instead.
Oh, maybe you don't know me that well.
Oh,
I want to
okay.
vindicate Thomas More. No, again, another connection is, thinking about how important when, we tend to talk about the women, but not how important it is that when a guy like your dad gives you a shot and gives you an extremely good education, you have a strong bond usually. And when we do all the parallel lives, especially when we talk about the women artists too. These
Yes.
women that are not born in royalty, but in the 16th century, get a shot at being independent and making more money than Holbein, like Levina Turnlake.
That's right. Well, Dr. Emma, today has been another fun episode of Parallel
Yeah.
Lives with you. And we have to start planning for the next one for next week.
Ooh.
I
Well,
know.
it's your turn. I've been doing a lot of deciding who we're talking about. It's going to
Okay.
be Rebecca.
So we're
Oh
going to
no, I
do
just started. What did I do?
we're going to do Thomas Seymour versus Thomas Seymour.
Yes,
A whole episode.
he was his worst enemy.
He was born at the same time, had the same parents.
Yeah, yeah. What a boring guy. No, I do think maybe we could, parallel lives, but also like, well, wasn't he a diplomat, but wasn't he also involved with someone? Maybe you want to talk about that and his
Oh,
letters. And, I do want to know these references, and I do want you to go back and read those letters. We need to know if they mention any Holbeins, Susannas, or anyone else.
yeah. I think I have all those letters saved somewhere, so I'll have to go back and
In a
look at.
box because you have a crush.
Oh my gosh. Really, I have a poster of Thomas Seymour on the door behind me, not Henry
That's in your
VIII.
room, not in
That's
here.
it. No, no, here we go. Here we go. Well, if you have any suggestions on who you want us to have parallel lives episodes on, I feel like people are always sending stuff. Keep them coming, because who knows? Maybe you were listening or watching this episode today and you thought about somebody who you're like, "Oh, these
Yeah.
two people would be good." Send them on over. Comment on YouTube. Head over to Patreon. Do it on social media. Let us know what you think.
Let us
'Cause
know. Send us an email or,
yeah. Our
we're here for
email.
suggestions.
If anybody wants to send us an email, we have an email. It's dremmaandme
Oh,
at
yes.
gmail.com. So if you want to shoot us an email, you can do that too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, thank you so much. I'm excited for the next one because who knows what it will be.
Who knows? Yes. See you next Thursday.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Tutors, Dynasty, and Beyond. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a moment to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening so you never miss a new release. And if you loved it, leave a quick review. It helps more history lovers find the show. Want to support the podcast and get bonus content? Head to patreon.com/tutorsdynasty. You can also find the link in the show notes of this episode. Join the conversation with Rebecca on social media at Tutors Dynasty. Until next time.